This is a block of hard maple, and I'm going to attach a faceplate onto this. Pre-drill holes for the screws so that they don't crack. Here I'm going to true up the outside edge, make it round. Here I pre-drilled the center hole, and now I'm opening it up to 5/16 diameter. You can go larger, you can do 21/64, 11/16. I'm going with the smaller size. Now we have to remove the faceplate so that we can continue working on it, and we need to get this exactly the same. Mounted exactly the same on the faceplate. We have to remove this from the faceplate. So what I'm going to do is mark one of the holes and mark the wood block so that it can be realigned. We need some layout lines. This is for the cutting blade. And we need this to go tangent to the shaft, to the hole. And then we need to make a relief cut. What I'm doing is making sure I'm not where the screw holes are going to be. This will allow the chips to come out. I think I'm going to take a little more than that. Kind of looks like Pac-Man here. That'll miss it. Okay, we'll cut that out with a bandsaw. Here what I had to do, I needed a larger chip release, so I chiseled this shelf out and I had to lose the screw, so I put a nut and bolt which will make it even sturdier. Now we need to fabricate a cutting blade. For a cutting blade I'm going to use an old saw blade, and I'm using a thin one. This is the like the laser cut, half the thickness of a normal circular blade. And the blade size, the stock that I need, is 1.5 by 2 inch. And I'll cut this out with my grinder. It'll have to be sharpened, formed into its proper shape, and then sharpened, and then heat treated, because the heating is going to change the temper that's on the blade. There, I cut it out with the angle grinder. Now it needs its final shaping. Now the blade has to be bent on the end, so we can't bend it unless we get it glowing red hot. Hottest part of the flame is above the tip of the blue that you can see. If you put it into the flame, it's a cooler spot, so I have it slightly above the tip. As the colors changes, you could tell temperature. And you can see the rainbow there. Okay. Okay, the blue is hotter, and the yellow tan, that's a cooler temperature. The blue is a temperature at which lead would be melting. The yellowish color would be a temperature that you heat the entire blade to when you temper it, and that's tempering after it's been hardened. If you can't get the temperature up with your kitchen stove, you can use a propane torch. Taking too long on the stove, one to the torch. Color changing quick. This time I'm grabbing a little further out. Looks good. Now what I'm going to do is a tempering. And all I need to do is heat the outer part up, the knife edge, cutting edge. Then we're going to just quench it in water. This is hardening. We're hardening it right now. You see the glow. And I'm just going to plunge this into a pot of water. Okay. Next step, sand this, get it shiny silver, and then we're going to temper it. Tempering, we'll be taking it to that brownish yellow color. You can see the carbon baked out. That's that silver part. Okay, now temper it and then sharpen. Okay, we're tempering now. You can see I have it over a lower heat. We want that straw brown color. This is already at the right temperature. The tip up here is, I want this area. You can see it's just starting. I shined the metal on the one side. So the brown temperature, the straw yellow brown, that's a temperature that you usually take a chisel. And the blue is usually like a knife or a screwdriver. So we're real close. This area here, the very tip is blue. That's really not that much of a working area. The cutting area right in here, that's going to do, right where the bend is, that's going to do most of the cutting. Just like toasting a marshmallow. That's what I used to tell my kids in the shop. Pretend you're toasting a marshmallow, get that nice golden brown, and we're just about there. And I think I'm going to call that quits right there. Okay, we can cool that off. A lot of times tempering is done in an oven and it's baked and held at that temperature, so I'm not in a real big hurry to quench it this time. I'm just going to quench it so that I can work with it. There you can see the color. When I heated it up and hardened, I mainly concentrated on the outer edge here, which is the cutting edge, and then that's the area that we needed to get tempered. So tempering means to soften, take away some of the extreme brittleness. So you temper it to the type of blade you're planning on using. And I have this right between a chisel and a knife. So let's sharpen it up and put it together. I'm using my diamond stone and the coarse because I'm still shaping the cutting edge. The shape of it is also, it's triangular. It's coarse, medium, and fine. And this shape is allowing me to get into the bend. The bend of this blade is probably going to do most of the cutting, most of the work. And I pre-shaped it, pre-sharpened it before I bent it because I knew there would be a lot of material that would have to be removed. Once I get this close to where I want it, then I'll run it through. That feels pretty sharp. I'll run it through the other grits, medium and fine. And that feels very sharp. I can feel it digging into my skin. Okay, now let's mount it. I have the hole marked. I'm going to step drill this, and it's going to go to 1/4 inch. All the way through. Okay, when I run the bolt through to hold the blade on, I have to have a parallel shoulder. So I'm going to cut this notch out. Here's a close look at the cutter. And I used a piece of maple, hard maple. And notice how the cutting tooth is set, and it protrudes just slightly above this edge, above the surface. Okay, it also hangs over, so it has less open knife to it, and you can see the hole. The blade comes into the hole. And the dowel or arrow shaft will come all the way through, and it will come through the headstock of the lathe. Let's put it on and give it a try. Okay, I'm cutting this board. This board is going to be a guard, so you don't push your hand into the spinning cutter. Also, I'm making a square hole the size of my dowel, or the stick, so that this won't have a tendency to spin in your hand when you're holding. The square will hold it from spinning. So the only force you have to push is a pushing force into the cutter. I'm using a piece of hardwood for this also. This is a piece of birch. Now the alignment of this guard is very important, and you can see here I'm using my tool rest. So to get a perfect alignment, you want to place a dowel that you had already cut, and you can see this movement here. You want to make sure that is dead center, and then we're just C-clamping this on. Okay, now this will protect your hand against accidental push into the blade. Okay, we're going to give this a test, and the wood that I'm using I pre-cut to 3/8 inch square, and this is sassafras. So the amazing thing with this wood is the smell after you're cutting it. It really is nice. Okay, now a lot of people, when they use their cutter, they put a taper. They knock the corners off. With this one, I don't think you need it, so let's give it a go. And right when you get to the end, this block is will no longer support it, so you have to make sure that when you're pulling on this at the end, you give it a good pull so that it doesn't spin in your hand. Here we go. Turn it on. Doesn't take a lot of force. You want to keep a uniform pressure and speed. Okay, it's already coming out the other end of the lathe. Right now I got a good grip, and you can hear a little bit of tearing because of the way I pulled. And this dowel rod, it even looks polished. So this is the proper diameter for an arrow shaft. Here we have a couple minutes of cutting, and perfect shape. Sticks are just about polished. So a little bit of hand sanding and this is good to go. Let me go over the cutter, a few pointers that's important. When you make a alignment with this, it has to be perfect with the cutter. It has to be dead center. So I showed how to do that with the dowel rod protruding through, and you adjust the guard block, and it also is designed to hold it from spinning. That block needs to be dead center. It keeps the shaft or the stick from spinning as you're cutting. It holds it, and you want to make sure that the cutting blade is pretty close to the guard, so that when it's making its final plunge, it'll have a tendency to want to spin in your hand. So right when you get to the end of the cut, you want to pull a little bit harder and quicker with a good grip on that shaft so that it doesn't spin. And it's only going to be maybe 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch unsupported from the guard. And you do need to have a guard. That's a pretty big blade. It's coming out about 3/4 inch. So when you double that from its spinning, that's about 1.5 inch diameter blade that's spinning, that if you slipped, your hand could go into it. So this guard is performing two functions. It's protecting you, it's also holding the stick as it's being fed into the cutting head. The other thing with this is you have to make it sure that the alignment of the cutting edge is perfect. It has to, the cutting edge itself has to be at point of tangency with the diameter of the shaft. If it's off, it's not going to cut, or it's going to want to cut a larger diameter than what the hole is through the cutter head. And at that point, it's going to be real tough or hard to feed that shaft through. What you're doing is fitting a larger diameter into a smaller hole. That doesn't go. So the blade has to be at point of tangency in order for it to cut properly. Also, the wood that you're using should be a straight grain wood. I was using sassafras, which when you cut that, it has a very good smell. And cut all the shafts, the blank stock, the exact size so that they fit into this jig. So that I have done on my table saw with the proper guards and proper guides for the right dimension. So straight grain wood, different types of wood will give you a different arrow weight. The sassafras, I believe, is more the weight of like a cedar. And I think it might be a little bit stronger. I don't know. I've never made the shafts out of the sassafras. This will be my first arrow shaft with sassafras. This is a pile of air-dried sassafras, and this will be turned into arrow shafts. Here we have the arrow shafts that were cut. Cutter head held up real well. Here's some of the shafts that were cut, and I cut 190. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it was very helpful. Thanks for watching, my friends. Bye-bye.